Hello, I'm Bryan Glick. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Computer Weekly. We're here today to talk about observability. Now, if you're here, some of you may think you already know what observability is. For those of you who are trying to learn a bit more about it, in its simplest form, observability is all about gathering the data from all across your IT infrastructure, from data centers through to servers, down to end users, to really get an understanding of what's going on across your infrastructure, to get the sort of insights that you need to make sure that you're able to make it as cost efficient and effective as it possibly can. Now, that's clearly a very broad topic. So to try and discuss some of the issues around observability, I've got a very broad panel of guests to come and talk to us about it. I'm joined, first of all, by James Brown. James is Senior Director of Field Product Management at Akamai. James, welcome.
Nice to be here.
Alongside James is Dominick Ash. Dominick is Services Director for Europe, Middle East and Africa at Hydrolix. Dominick, welcome.
Hi there.
And last but by no means least, John Bradshaw, Director of Cloud Computing Technology and Strategy for Europe, Middle East and Africa at Akamai. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming along to share some of your experiences and knowledge around this important topic. Dominick, man in the middle, let me come to you first, if I may, to kick us off. Let's look from a business perspective. Observability, it's one of these technology trends that may be more familiar to people in IT than perhaps some of the people outside IT. Why is observability such an important topic for businesses? Why should business leaders in particular be interested in this? And what are the problems you're looking to solve here from a business perspective?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that we are faced with all of the different customers that we have. So observability really addresses a key challenge, which is about the digital experience. So every company has a digital need, a digital experience. Whether you're in logistics, finance, and gaming, etc., and that correlates to a user experience. So observability really provides an awareness of what that user experience is, and if you get it right, you can qualify that user experience. That is a good customer experience. And if you don't have observability, you can actually have problems which you're unaware about, which impacts your revenue, impacts your future growth. So it's really a core part of your business, knowing that your business is doing well, or in some areas, what key decisions to make for the future.
Now, any business is going to listen to what you've been saying there, Dominick. Say, yeah, of course, we want to have the best user experience. We want to have give the best performance to our customers. But sometimes when you approach some of these projects, what you don't think about is the risks of getting it wrong. And James, perhaps you can give us some insight into this. When you look at organisations that perhaps don't understand observability so well, don't prioritise it as well, what are the risks involved here? What's at stake if you don't get this right?
So, as you said in your introduction, observability is that visibility across the core infrastructure that you're going to be running on-prem, in cloud, or wherever. Really, if you don't have that observability in place, what starts to happen is that knock-on effect up into the business objectives that leaders have. So that could be around controlling costs. If you look at a scalable infrastructure such as the cloud, you need to start understanding the costs and making sure you're driving value for money. If you're looking around the kind of customer success metrics, a lot of that is on speed of delivery, its latencies, etc. So are you giving your customers the right experience? Otherwise, you're going to lose them. And then you've got high-level business objectives that you can tie to this as well. You can start looking at customer retention and a set of other pieces. That's one side on a kind of classic business. Depending on where you operate, it could also run into the kind of compliance side of things as well, especially with things like security, especially with things like data. At that point, there can be real business implications for the leaders of that business if they don't understand where their data is, if they're not keeping things secure, if they can't audit and report correctly.
No, it's interesting. We've talked about observability from the perspective of how it means for your customers. You've talked about it there, James, from the perspective of what it means around things like regulatory and security and a lot of those sort of internal considerations. John, let me come to you to put the next question. Given those challenges, those opportunities, in your experience of talking to customers, what are the real pain points that they're experiencing that are stopping them from being able to do these sort of things, to be able to get the sort of visibility across their infrastructure that they really need?
Well, a lot of the times it comes down to the fact that the business wants to take everything forever. And then IT comes back and says, that's great, but have you got infinite money? Because the problem is these tools that exist at the moment are fantastic. They give you great insight, but the more you retain, exponentially, they become more and more expensive. So there is a trade-off between having enough history to be able to get some useful information out of that data and preventing yourself going bankrupt. So working out where that trading point is. And when IT and when the technology teams are successful is when they're partnering with the business to help them work out, well, if I could see this, then I could make these kinds of decisions, or I could help influence this kind of outcome. And at that point, you're starting to see it move from being just purely about cost to, oh, actually, maybe this could drive revenue, or maybe this could drive better outcomes for our users or our customers.
I mean, I think that's such an interesting point that you make there, John. I mean, I think most IT leaders, if they're watching this, will recognise that sort of pressure of saying, yeah, you need to do this because you got to cut down on costs. You got to do things more efficiently. You got to take cost out of your IT infrastructure. I'm sure a lot of ears will have pricked up where you're saying, actually, one way of approaching this challenge of observability is that it can change the way that people look at IT. They can look at it more strategically. They look at how it can directly help the business rather than just take cost out of the business. And considering what we've heard about what the benefits of this are, that's got to be a pretty attractive way to approach this.
Absolutely. And all of that data becomes more valuable the more you can concentrate it, or rather the more sources you can pull into a single place. I mean, I remember running a team and asking them to enable some observability in a managed container platform. They hit the wrong button. I came back the day later and I had a 20 grand bill. It's easy to make those mistakes and not quite get, why are we making these choices? Why do we want to know more about what's going on? But as soon as you get that sense and you're in a position where you can enable more insight across your environment, you're going to start to be able to make much more informed decisions.
Let's try and bring this to life a little bit. Let's try and illustrate it perhaps with some real life examples or potential examples. Dominic, let me come back to you on this. You talked earlier on about customer experience, performance, and all these sort of things. If you think about all the many organisations I'm sure you're working with in this area, can you give us some ideas of some of the real life ways that companies are using observability strategically to drive growth, for example, rather than just to cut cost?
Yes, for sure. So we have all of the different verticals that come to our business to use it. Often it can be as a consequence of some level of impact. An airline, for example, that had been impacted with malicious activity, DDoSes, that had very limited opportunity to identify what was happening and consequently taking their infrastructure down. So utilising this observability tool, which requires not just the fact that you can see it, but you need to see the data in near real time. That's a key element for understanding what's going on. So you can make decisions quickly. And so understanding that there's something malicious allows you to then take action and steer away the malicious activity. Now, this particular airline had worked with us, and they actually required more than just the observability, but it also had a compliance regulatory need to store data for at least 1 year because of the transaction nature and because of the malicious nature as well. With our company, we were able to provide not only a cost savings with the storage for less than what they were previously paying, but also to be able to extend that storage retention to 15 months. So that was a very key example. Another one that we'd worked with, which is a grocery retailer, they were using standard buckets of data, which they were then trawling through. That could take a good couple of days with third parties that were also providing personalization. And that meant that they couldn't really identify what the customer experience was for at least a week. Now, again, utilizing our product, they were able to actually bring all of that data together and provide that in near real time. And then they could make make good decisions about some of their campaigns that they were running, that they were being effective, or if they weren't being effective, then they can actually then make key decisions to change it. And I'll leave you with one other example, which is a telecoms operator that, again, had been operating with virtually no awareness at all, typically storing data for about 5 days, and no operational process was really truly defined. And again, utilizing our product, which was not just about providing observability, but as a managed service where we could actually generate the data for them, so that it was quick and fast to actually provide that data. And so going from 5 days to 15 months, which is typically what most of our customers move to, is something that we see time and time again. So we typically address, some of that malicious behavior. We provide the observability, and we allow customers then to really take the next step, which is identify key campaigns. For example, Black Friday, which is very important and a very busy time for us. Many of our customers are using Black Friday to recognize, how their businesses had operated during that period. And we provided that opportunity for them to see that in real time whilst keeping the cost at a very manageable level.
Yeah, no, that some really good examples there of, how observability can drive genuine, business level benefit, not just, IT operational benefits. Let me just ask you one follow up to that, if I may, Dominic. Let's just generalize that a little bit for somebody who's watching, who's not in the sort of the different industries that you were talking about there. If you could pull out some of the key learning points from that, if somebody's thinking, how do I build a business case for this? What typically are the key areas where organisations can get measurable benefit, the sort of thing you could build a business case around?
Yes, for sure. So cost has always been a key factor towards observation, which has always been prohibitive. And we found that many customers had to make hard decisions to either retain data for a shorter period of time, for example, just 3 months, or just sample that data rather than actually having the full fidelity, which is what we've able to do. So cost has been one key area which actually has been a significant benefit for a lot of our customers. They've saved a lot of money. And then the data retention, what was maybe 3 months, now typically with most of our customers is 15 months and beyond. And so they can now actually utilize that data for so many other areas. And then the operational workflow, which is sometimes an area that is not really truly appreciated. The overhead of having a team that has to be skilled to understand that technology, to actually have those data points, to be able to interpret them, and then to take those actions. Again, this is something where we can actually reduce that whole operation into a much more streamlined process that allows the businesses to be a lot faster with their decision and their observation.
Part of building a business case for observability is also thinking about what the potential impacts of this are on the business, as well as the sort of direct or growth related areas that you've talked about there, Dominic. James, let me come back to you on this one. You talked earlier on about what's at stake here if you don't get it right. How do you take some of those things that are at stake and turn those into metrics that allow you to measure the business impact of observability, again, to feed into this business case?
Yes, this is the joy of kind of having observability on your observability. So the first thing is, if you go ask a technologist what they want to go measure on a server and rack level, you have an endless set of metrics. The challenge is how do you then turn those into more business level of metrics? So how can you understand what you are delivering to your customer? At that point, it is around trying to understand what's the impact of that. So, for example, if you can reduce latency on your site, are you seeing less drop-off during a shopping experience? If you are, improving uptime of a SaaS platform, are you seeing a reduction in support queries and a reduction in cancellations and reduction? It does take thought and planning. It takes thought and planning to take it from a raw set of operational metrics into a series of business metrics that you're going to do. And then what you're talking about is that next level of saying, okay, if we now have these business metrics and if we improve on them, now what do we think the output's going to be? But yeah, as I said, it does require thought, and it requires kind of working through and understanding what's the data and what you're going to measure it. Because one of the worst things about observability is that when you realize that you haven't been tracking the metrics that you need, you can't necessarily go back and get them. So getting that understanding and building it up systematically as you would do any other IT project is key.
So, let's close the loop on this, and I'll come to you with this one, John. We've understood the business benefits. We've identified some of the areas where observability can have an impact that you need to measure. Let's say you've implemented observability now. In your experience, how do businesses then go about quantifying the actual real life benefits, actually measuring the metrics that went into that business case to prove that this is delivering what it wants to deliver, and maybe even finding additional benefits that they weren't expecting?
So it's a combination of taking that business case and constantly going back and testing it, because what was right when you submitted it and you approved it may no longer be the case. Your business may have moved on, things may have changed. But to do that, you need to make sure you have the right kinds of KPIs. They shouldn't be ones that are just, we need the site to be faster. Okay, so what? It needs to be, if the site is faster, then more people use it, they stay on it, they buy more things, whatever it happens to be. And you're constantly then checking and testing, and that testing piece becomes really vital. You can keep making it faster, but at some point you're going to hit the law of diminishing returns, where you could spend infinite amounts of money and get zero return. So finding that balance and partnering technology with the business to keep you tuning that is where the real value starts to come out. And once you've demonstrated that, what else can you do with observability? Can you expand it not just from making you more money, but reducing your costs or reducing your risks? If you can start to predict where things are going on or where they may go wrong, can you be proactive in your approach rather than reacting to that service call that comes in?
Okay. So between the three of you, you've painted a really compelling picture, I think, here of, why observability is so important to a business, how you measure it, what the benefits you're likely to get from it are, what the impact of it on your organisation can be. By way of starting to wrap some of this up, let's just take a little look into the future, and I'll ask each of you to give me a response on this one. What's coming next? How do you see this area of observability evolving over the next few years? What are the key trends that people should be looking out for? And James, let's go left to right as I'm doing it, and ask you first.
So at this point, I get to call the AI buzzword bingo card first. We've always had a problem. Large amounts of data is needed, but to analyze and get the answers out of large amounts of data is very difficult. And as we look, we've had machine learning. We've worked our way through that, and now we're at the latter stages, and we're starting to move towards AI, large language models, etc. This is where what we should be able to drive is an easier path to get the answers that you need. For anyone who's worked in the kind of big data space, it can be very complicated to get the right answers out of the data, or correct answers out of your data. It's generally very easy to get answers out of data. Whether they're correct or not is different. And this is where some of the advancements in AI, I think, are going to help, especially on the business side, allow business users to relate much better and ask questions of that data and start to understand the correlation. So we were just talking about using observability to reduce costs. Okay, what happens if your reduction in cost is reducing your site stability? How do you start correlating potentially between two things that are, what looked independent? So I think that AI coming in is going to be a massive game changer in the next couple of years.
Dominic, James has stolen AI already. Hope that wasn't going to be your answer. He's stolen it from you. Well, outside of AI, what else, Dominic, is going to be a key trend here?
I'll add some components around that AI, which is that fundamentally the problem with observation and the challenges of why companies were hard to adopt was around cost, around the storage, around the compute needs, and around being able to see that telemetry in near real time. And this is the problem that we've managed to overcome. So we can now actually, we're taking in billions of data rows per second now in our company, and we can provide an analysis around that in near real time within 5-10 seconds. But at the same time, we managed to overcome this problem around cost, about budget, by providing that technology that allows us to be able to store such a large volume of data. So to James's point about the AI, it is now opening up that opportunity to really capture and store this amount of data, so you can now utilize tools, be it with AI and other factors, that allow you to then make really interesting decisions, understanding how your business has evolved and actually how you can incorporate AI to actually make the decisions going forward as well. So I think this will become a significant, once that customers realize that it's not so prohibitive, customers will now actually start to use this and many other areas as well. And I think data is just, the fidelity of data is just going to become stronger and stronger.
Cool. John, have they left anything for you? What are you seeing going forward?
So I think there's a real opportunity here for the promise of AI or ML ops, which was a big thing a few years ago, but it wasn't quite there. With this vast amount of data, you can now trend what good looks like. Well, if you can do that, you can start to tune how you deploy human capital. So maybe you don't need a 24/7 team supporting your application, because the ML ops system can just about keep you on a level playing field until normal business hours. Well, if that's the case, you can pull a huge amount of cost out from on-call rotors, all of those other bits and pieces. And you can start to tune how you work with technology. That could be dramatically improve the bottom line for a number of organizations.
It's an exciting future, obviously. There's a lot going on, AI, all sorts of things that are going to make a huge difference to people. But I guess probably for a lot of people that are watching here, they're perhaps still at an early stage. What's coming in the future is very much phase 2 for them. Again, I'll close with one question I'll put to each of the three of you again. We've talked about a lot, and it, as I said at the start, it's a very broad subject. But if there's one thing that you would like an IT leader watching this video to take away from this, that they should keep in mind as they're setting out on a journey to improve or develop or introduce observability into their infrastructure, what would that one thing be? And to make it fair this time, Dominic, I'll come to you first on this one.
So I think everybody really appreciates the need for this data. Like, I think once everybody adopts it, they get it. But I think it's important that once you're on that train, to be able to really utilize and capitalize on this data. This is what actually defines, the direction, whether the thing that you've been working on, this project, this release, this new game, etc., anything around that digital experience has been successful. And then I think it helps you then steer what's next, based on that data. So I think it's just really embracing and understanding the need for this data, so that it can help steer your business. And I think that's where I've seen the challenges in the past. Businesses find it hard to make decisions, and this actually provides that foundation. Okay.
John, what's your one takeaway?
I would echo that in that, imagine what could you do if you could retain all of the information in your business, all of the transactions, all of the engagements you have internally, externally, and what could you do with that to better prove your business and look at ways of growing and adapting and changing for the future? I think that's a hugely powerful and gives a huge amount of innovation to you as an organisation.
James, you get the final word. What's your big message to anybody who's watching now?
So I think it's easy to pigeonhole observability into a technical corner. As we've all said, there is this correlation between what's happening at the technical level in the business, and I think this is a great opportunity for technical leaders to engage across their businesses, to bring in marketing, to bring in sales, to bring in support, to bring in operations, and all these different elements, and start help crafting how do we map from CPU, memory, and latency all the way through to, actually what's the experience our customers are having, and how can we demonstrate that we're meeting business goals. It's not necessarily easy, but I think for businesses it's absolutely key.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for for coming along, sharing all your experiences there. A big thank you to James Brown from Akamai, to Dominick Ash from Hydrolix, and to John Bradshaw from Akamai also. If you want to find out more about the topics that have been discussed about observability, there are going to be some links at the end of this video that you can click on that will take you to a lot more information. But that's all we have time for now. I hope we've given you a useful introduction to what observability is and why it is so important for your business, and in particular to a lot of the very significant benefits that you could achieve by taking this observability approach across your IT infrastructure as well. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.